The cowboy's laughter cut through the dusty air as he yanked the young Apache girl by the arm, mocking her silence in front of his gang. She didn't flinch, not even when he spat near her feet. What he didn't know was that the man he was humiliating her in front of was no ordinary father. He was the chief, the kind of leader who could summon an entire tribe with a single word, and once he found out, the price for that insult would be far greater than the cowboy ever imagined. The sun beat down hard on the trading post at the edge of the desert, where whiskey-scented air mixed with the metallic tang of sweat and gun oil. Cowboys lounged by their horses, boots on railings, eyes scanning for trouble they could call fun. Among them, James Cutter was the loudest, a broad-shouldered drifter with a scar over his chin and a smirk that never left his face. Trouble was his trade, and on that blazing afternoon he found his target. Near the well stood a girl no older than 17, her long black hair braided with strips of red cloth, her dress plain but worn with dignity. She carried a basket of herbs, moving silently, avoiding the men's gazes. Most passed her by without comment, but not Cutter. He swaggered toward her, spurs jangling, and blocked her path. "Well, look at this," he sneered, circling her like a wolf. Pretty little bird strayed too far from the nest. "What's the matter? Can't you even greet a man proper?" His hand shot out, brushing the braid that hung over her shoulder. She stiffened but said nothing, her dark eyes fixed straight ahead. The other cowboys laughed, egging him on. One muttered, "Bet she don't even speak English." Cutter chuckled, tugging the basket from her grip and spilling the herbs into the dust. The girl bent to pick them up, her movements deliberate, calm. Too calm for someone cornered by 6 armed men. From the shade of the porch, an older figure watched. His face was lined by years of sun and hardship, his expression unreadable. He wore no badge, no iron at his hip, only a beaded necklace and a gaze so steady it silenced anyone who dared meet it. To most, he looked like another weary native father, standing back while the world spat on his bloodline. To those who knew, he was far more. He was Chief Nahel, leader of a people Cutter wouldn't dare cross if he knew the truth. But ignorance is a dangerous fire, and Cutter's mockery was feeding it fast. The girl, his daughter, kept her silence, though her eyes flickered briefly toward the man on the porch. One glance was enough. Her father had seen everything, and the cowboy, laughing louder by the second, had no idea he had just stepped onto sacred ground. Cutter kicked at the spilled herbs, grinding them into the dirt with his boot heel as if to erase the girl's patience. "Ain't worth nothing anyway," he jeered, leaning close enough that the reek of whiskey clung to her skin. The circle of cowboys closed tighter, their laughter echoing under the dry wooden beams of the post. Still, she didn't cry. She didn't beg. She stooped, gathering what leaves she could, her movement steady, her face carved from stone. That silence unnerved Cutter more than any insult could have. He grabbed her wrist and jerked her upright, forcing her to look at him. "Say something, girl," he growled, his fingers digging into her flesh. Before she could answer, a shadow shifted. The old man on the porch stepped forward, boots tapping slow, steady against the boards. Every sound seemed to die with his movement. The horses at the rails snorted, the wind stalled, even the jeers softened. Chief Nahel's presence was not loud, not flashy, but it filled the air heavier than gun smoke. Cutter turned, scoffing. "And who's this? Your keeper?" He still clutched the girl's wrist, as though daring the old man to claim her. Nahel said nothing. Instead, he walked past Cutter, past the circle of cowboys, and knelt beside the herbs still scattered in the dust. His hands, weathered by years of work and war, moved carefully as he gathered each sprig, brushing the dirt away. He placed them back into the basket, one by one, as though no insult had been given, as though time itself bowed to patience. The girl lowered her gaze, relief flickering in her posture. She knew this ritual. Her father's first act was always to restore what others tried to destroy. Cutter laughed, but unease crept into his eyes. "You hear me, old man? She belongs to me now. Bought her with courage, fair and square." He glanced at his gang, needing their approval. "Unless you want to pay for her, too." Still kneeling, Nahel looked up at him at last. His eyes were sharp, dark pools that saw deeper than flesh. He placed the filled basket gently into his daughter's hands, then rose to his full height. The girl stepped behind him, silent as before. Nahel's voice, when it came, was low but unshakable. "You have taken nothing. What is not for sale cannot be bought." The laughter faltered. A few of the younger cowboys shuffled uneasily, glancing at each other. Something in Nahel's tone carried the weight of command, a language older than the saloon's walls, older than the town itself. Cutter forced a smirk, though his grip tightened on his revolver's handle. Big words for a nobody. He spat to the side, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. "You think you can tell me what's mine?" Nahel didn't move. He didn't need to. His daughter's steady breathing behind him was proof enough that the balance of power had already shifted. "Walk away, cowboy," Nahel said quietly, "while you still can." For a moment, silence stretched so thin it threatened to snap. Then one of Cutter's men barked a laugh to break it. "He's bluffing, Jim. Just an old native with too much pride." The spell fractured. Cutter sneered again, emboldened by his men. He shoved past Nahel, pressing close, his voice dripping venom. "I don't take orders from savages." Nahel's jaw flexed, but he made no move. Only his hand, calloused and scarred, came to rest on the girl's shoulder, steadying her as Cutter loomed over them. It wasn't a gesture of fear, it was protection, a reminder to her that he would bear the insult, for now. The cowboys laughed again, louder, mocking. But beneath their noise, a new sound stirred on the wind. Hooves. Faint at first, then clearer, many hooves, moving as one, a rhythm older than the town itself. Dust began to rise beyond the ridgeline, curling in the late afternoon sun. Cutter frowned, turning his head. His smirk faltered when he saw what was coming. Riders. Dozens of them. Apache warriors cresting the hill, painted and silent, their faces unreadable, their horses steady as the earth. The laughter died at once. Even the bravest of Cutter's gang shifted nervously, hands twitching toward their belts. The girl stood taller behind her father, her silence no longer submission, but certainty. Nahel's gaze never left Cutter as he spoke one last time. Calm as the desert night. "Now you will see whose ground you stand on." The dust cloud thickened, swallowing the sun's glare until the horizon burned with a red haze. One by one the riders came into view, rows of painted faces, feathers bound to braids, rifles slung low but steady. Their horses moved in unison, hooves drumming the ground like thunder. The sound rattled the planks beneath the trading post, echoing in the ribs of every man standing there. Cutter's smirk vanished for good. He let go of the girl's wrist as though her skin had turned to fire. His men shifted uneasily, some glancing at their leader, others at the rifles that now glinted under the desert light. Nahel stood unmoving, his daughter still behind him, her grip tight on the basket he had restored. He did not lift a hand or call out. He didn't need to. The riders fanned out wordlessly, forming a wide circle around the post. No shots fired, no shouts, just presence, calm, controlled, inevitable. Cutter muttered under his breath. Hell, his hand hovered near his revolver, but even he knew a single twitch could turn the air into lead. He swallowed hard, sweat glistening along his temple. One of his men, younger, broke the silence first. "Jim, maybe we should—" "Shut up!" Cutter snapped, his voice cracking. The sharpness only betrayed his fear. The riders slowed to a halt. The dust settled. For a heartbeat, nothing moved but the wind tugging at the fringe of Nahel's coat. Then one rider dismounted, a tall warrior with a scar splitting his cheek, carrying no gun, only a bow slung across his back. He walked forward with the slow certainty of a man who owned the ground beneath him. He stopped beside Nahel, nodded once, and spoke in Apache. The words rolled like low thunder, impossible for the cowboys to follow, but their meaning was clear. "We are here. We saw what happened. What is your will?" Nahel's reply was just as steady, his voice measured, carrying enough for all to hear, though he did not shout. His daughter's head tilted, as if she knew the rhythm by heart. The exchange lasted less than a minute, yet in that silence Cutter's men shifted from bravado to unease. They understood nothing of the language, but everything of the posture. This was no plea for help. This was judgment in progress. Cutter tried to laugh again, but the sound faltered halfway. He pointed at Nahel with a trembling hand. You planned this, brought them down on us." Nahel turned to him slowly, his face carved in stone. "I did not summon them. They came because they do not tolerate shame." The girl finally spoke, her voice soft but clear enough to cut the air. "And you gave them shame." Every head turned. The cowboys blinked, startled that she spoke English at all. Cutter's jaw worked soundlessly. For the first time, his gang saw him hesitate. The Apache warrior who had dismounted stepped closer to Cutter, staring him down with eyes that betrayed neither anger nor mercy, only certainty. Cutter's hand twitched again toward his revolver. His men stiffened, torn between loyalty and survival. Nahel lifted a hand, palm outward. At once, the circle of riders shifted. Some dismounted, leading their horses forward, closing the distance. The sound of leather creaked, rifles adjusted. Still no one raised a weapon. Cutter's throat worked as he whispered harshly to his men, "We can't let 'em corner us. If they—" But one of his gang cut him off, his voice tight. "Jim, look at 'em. We draw. We die." The truth lay heavy in the air. Even Cutter could see it. 6 cowboys with pistols against dozens of warriors, each one steady as the mountains. His bravado was cracking, piece by piece. Nahel stepped forward at last, closing the space until only a few feet remained between him and Cutter. The old chief's shadow stretched across the boards, long and dark. His voice, though low, reached every man present. "You wanted to buy what cannot be bought. You mocked what you do not understand. You touched what was not yours." His gaze hardened, a storm without thunder. "Now you must answer." Cutter's lip curled, half snarl, half fear. "Answer." "To you." Nahel didn't blink. "No, to all of them." The riders behind him shifted, the sound of hooves scraping wood and earth echoing like a drumbeat. Cutter's men looked around, realizing they weren't simply surrounded. They were already judged. The girl stood straighter, her braid catching the sun, her silence now louder than the cowboys' trembling curses. Cutter spat into the dirt, the gesture desperate, not defiant. His men took a step back, no longer laughing, no longer loyal. The circle tightened, and with it, the last trace of escape vanished. The silence hung heavier than any noose. The cowboys stood trapped, their laughter dissolved into tight throats and darting eyes. The Apache riders did not move, but their presence pressed down like a mountain, inescapable, undeniable. Then, from the far edge of the circle, another rider pushed through. He was younger than the others, barely more than 20, but carried himself with authority. Across his saddle was a worn leather satchel, bulging with papers. He dismounted, walked straight to Nahel, and handed him the satchel without a word. The old chief opened it slowly. He pulled out a folded sheet, stiff with dust and creases, then held it to the fading light. The paper bore a crude sketch, the ink smudged but still clear. James Cutter's scarred face, his smirk frozen in black lines. Beneath it, bold letters shouted the truth. Wanted, James Cutter. Murder, theft, assault, $500 reward, dead or alive. The girl's eyes flickered, steady yet sharp. Cutter's men recoiled, muttering under their breath. One cursed, another spat in disbelief. The gang's leader went pale beneath the sunburn, his bravado stripped away faster than a snake's skin. Nahel lowered the paper, his gaze unshaken. He did not need to speak. The revelation had already shifted the ground beneath Cutter's boots. But he did speak, and his voice was iron. "You are not only a coward," Nahel said, "but a hunted coward." Cutter staggered back a step, his hand twitching toward his revolver again, though now even his men edged away from him. "That's a lie," he hissed, though the tremor betrayed him. "Some bounty hunter trash. They'll put anyone's face on paper if it means a reward." The younger Apache warrior stepped forward, taking the poster from Nahel and holding it high for all to see. The cowboys could not deny it now. One of them, a broad man with a shaved head, turned on Cutter with fury. "You never told us. You brought us here while the whole territory's after your neck." Cutter snapped back, desperate. "Shut your mouth. You think they'll treat you better than me? You ride with me? You share the blame." But the words rang hollow. The gang's loyalty cracked, splintering like dry wood under fire. The men shifted, each calculating his own survival. Nahel's daughter broke the silence again, her tone sharper than before. "The truth has a way of walking into the light." Her father did not glance at her, but the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth betrayed his pride. Cutter's rage boiled over. He drew his revolver in a blur, leveling it at Nahel. Gasps erupted from his own men. But before his finger could squeeze the trigger, an arrow hissed through the air. It buried itself into the plank at his feet, quivering inches from his boot. The shot had not missed. It had warned. The circle of Apache riders tensed, bows and rifles shifting, but Nahel lifted his hand again. Instantly, the weapons lowered. His authority alone held them back, the invisible reins of discipline that bound the tribe tighter than any rope. Nahel's eyes locked on Cutter. "You bring shame with every step. Even your own men see it now. You are no leader. You are a hunted man who pretends at power." Cutter's chest heaved. His revolver hand trembled, betraying fear he could no longer swallow. He looked to his men for support, but found only downcast eyes and clenched jaws. They had seen enough. One of them muttered, almost to himself, $500. That'd fix everything. Cutter spun on him. "You'd turn on me." But his words broke against the stone wall of silence. The circle of Apaches watched, their judgment silent but merciless. The cowboys were no longer one gang. They were a pack unraveling, prey tearing itself apart under the weight of truth. Nahel stepped closer, his shadow falling over Cutter like dusk itself. His daughter stood firm at his back, the basket still in her hands, every herb inside now more precious than gold. "This is the choice before you," Nahel said. "Face your crimes among your own kind, or face judgment here." Cutter spat, the last ember of defiance. "You don't scare me. You and your painted riders think you can decide who lives and dies. I've killed men for less." But even as he shouted, his voice cracked, the sound of hooves shifting around him, the glint of steel and bone-tipped arrows, the weight of betrayal from his own men. It all pressed in. His words had no teeth. The girl's eyes never left him, calm, steady, unafraid. And then, from behind the circle, came the faint clatter of another set of hooves. Slow, deliberate, drawing closer. Every rider turned. Dust parted to reveal yet another figure approaching, this one not Apache, not cowboy. A stranger cloaked in long oilskin, a rifle across his saddle, and a bounty poster tucked into his vest. A bounty hunter, and his eyes fixed on Cutter. The bounty hunter's horse clopped slowly into the circle, its hooves sounding like a gavel striking wood. Dust swirled around him, catching the dying sunlight and painting his silhouette in gold and shadow. His oilskin coat was long and worn, the brim of his hat pulled low, hiding his eyes until he drew closer. When he finally raised his head, the stare he fixed on Cutter was colder than steel fresh from the forge. Nobody moved. The cowboys stared, wide-eyed, their loyalty already frayed to breaking. The Apache riders shifted slightly, their bows adjusting, rifles steady in their saddles. Nahel remained still, his daughter behind him, the basket clutched to her chest as if nothing, no threat, no violence, would make her let it go. The bounty hunter dismounted without a word. His boots hit the dirt, heavy, certain. He reached inside his coat, and the cowboys tensed, hands twitching toward weapons. But instead of a gun, he pulled out a folded poster, smoothed it flat with deliberate care, and held it up. It was the same paper Nahel had already shown, Cutter's face sketched with crude lines, the same bold words, "Wanted, dead or alive." Only this copy bore fresher ink, the edges less weathered, and a larger number scrawled across the bottom. The bounty had risen, now $1,000. Gasps broke from Cutter's men. Even the Apaches stirred, eyes narrowing. $1,000 was no small sum. It meant not only was Cutter hunted, it meant the hunt was desperate. Authorities wanted him gone, enough to double the price on his head. The bounty hunter's voice was low, flat, carrying across the silent circle. "James Cutter, I've ridden 3 states for you. You're worth more dead than alive. But the paper says either, so I'll take you how you stand." Cutter's hand twitched on his revolver, his knuckles white. His men edged back further, the distance between him and them widening like a crack in dry earth. One of them muttered, $1,000. Hell, we'd be fools not to. He didn't finish. Cutter's glare froze him mid-thought. Nahel finally spoke, his voice calm but cutting. You came for him. His tone held no question. The bounty hunter nodded once. I don't care about your people, Chief. I don't care about the girl. All I want is him. Hand him over, and I'll be gone before the moon's up. The Apache riders murmured among themselves, their voices low, the language carrying like wind through tall grass. Some wanted to let it happen, to watch the white man's justice devour its own. Others bristled, for they knew this was more than a transaction. Cutter had not merely offended one tribe or one family, he had defiled honor. To release him without judgment would mean silence in the face of insult. Nahel's daughter stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fire in her eyes. He mocked us in front of all. He touched me as if I were less than dust. If you take him, bounty man, the lesson dies with him, and our shame remains. The bounty hunter's gaze flicked to her, surprised at her English, then back to Nahel. Chief, I've no quarrel with your honor, but the law pays in gold, not pride. I'll be taking him. Cutter saw his opening. He straightened, his voice hoarse but desperate. You hear that? I'm not yours to judge. I'm wanted by the law. This here's a civilized man, not a savage court. Let him take me, and you can keep your dignity. You don't want blood spilled here. The cowboys muttered agreement, clinging to Cutter's lifeline even as they doubted it. The bounty hunter's hand hovered near his revolver, ready to draw if anyone defied him. Nahel did not move, did not blink. He stepped forward, standing now between the hunter and Cutter, his presence as immovable as the desert cliffs. The law of your paper, he said, is not the only law in this land. There is another, older law. You do not mock a daughter in front of her father. You do not touch what is sacred and walk away breathing. The bounty hunter's jaw clenched. That may be your way. But I ride for the governor's pay, not your tribe's honor. His hand brushed his revolver grip, slow, deliberate. The Apache circle tightened again. Horses shifted, bows drew taut, rifles lifted slightly higher. A single wrong move would turn the clearing into fire and chaos. Cutter looked from one face to another, panic replacing his swagger. Damn it, don't just stand there, he barked at his men. Shoot somebody! Save me! But his gang no longer moved at his command. Some lowered their eyes. Others stared at the bounty hunter, calculating whether the reward was worth more than their leader's life. The girl stepped closer to her father, her braid brushing his arm, her voice a whisper only he could hear. If you yield him, we lose. If you keep him, we bleed. Nahel's gaze never left the bounty hunter, but his silence deepened. The old chief was weighing more than life or death. He was weighing legacy, pride, survival. And then the bounty hunter said the words that cracked the air. If you stand in my way, Chief, I'll put a bullet in you too. The words hit the circle like a whip crack. For the first time, Nahel's expression shifted. His eyes narrowed, his jaw set, but he did not step back. Around them, Apache rifles rose another inch, the creak of leather and bowstrings louder than any threat. The bounty hunter's hand hovered over his revolver, but he had to know, if he drew, he would not get a second shot. Cutter froze between them, sweat dripping down his temple. His bravado was gone, replaced by the twitchy eyes of a cornered animal. He glanced from the hunter's hand to Nahel's steady frame, calculating whether to throw himself at one or beg the other. Nahel's daughter stood still, basket clutched to her chest. Her voice, calm and even, broke the silence. If you kill my father, you kill more than a man. You wake a storm that will never sleep again. The bounty hunter's jaw clenched. He tried to ignore her, but the weight of her words clung to him. He'd seen wars flare from insults smaller than this. He'd buried men who thought a single bullet could silence an entire people. Still, money was money. Cutter found his tongue, desperate. Listen to her, she's right. Kill him and you'll have 100 of them on your trail. You don't want that. Take me to the governor. I'm worth gold, and gold don't bleed. The hunter's eyes flicked to him. Cutter sounded less like a man begging for justice, and more like a man bargaining for scraps. The hunter had no respect for it. He spat into the dirt. You're right about one thing. You're worth gold. But not if I die trying to drag you. Nahel finally spoke, his voice so calm it cut sharper than a shout. You bring your paper. You bring your governor. But here, his words weigh nothing. My people saw what you did. You mocked what is sacred. The law of this earth does not vanish because you carry ink and coin. The hunter sneered. Sacred? She's a girl. You think I care what's sacred to you? A murmur swept through the Apache circle, low and dangerous. Even the horses pawed the earth as if they felt the insult. The girl did not flinch. She simply turned her gaze to the hunter, her eyes dark as storm clouds. Nahel raised his hand again, and the murmurs quieted instantly. His control was absolute, the tribe's anger bound by his restraint. He turned back to the hunter. You stand here with two choices. Take your prey and admit you cannot see what honor demands. Or leave and let us finish what was begun. The hunter shifted, the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing into him. He was a killer, a tracker, a man hardened by years of chasing fugitives across deserts and mountains. But he had never stood before a circle like this, an entire people whose silence was louder than a war cry. Cutter broke again, his voice shrill. Don't just stand there. You're here for me. Take me, damn you. You hear me. The hunter's lip curled. He hated weakness, and every word from Cutter was weakness. You'll hang either way, he muttered, but maybe I'll let them soften you first. The cowboys stirred at last, their loyalty shattered. One stepped forward, pointing at Cutter. He ain't worth dying over. Not for us, not for anyone. You want him, take him, we're done. Another spat at Cutter's boots. We followed you for coin, not for a grave. Cutter spun, betrayal etched across his face. You dogs! You'd sell me out like this. The bounty hunter's hand twitched again toward his revolver. The Apache riders bristled, bows lifting higher. The ground itself seemed to vibrate with the tension, as though the desert waited to drink blood. Nahel's daughter moved closer to her father, her voice a whisper but sharp as flint. They are breaking. He is breaking. Do not bend. Nahel placed a steady hand on her shoulder, never taking his eyes from the hunter. His silence was a wall, impenetrable, daring the man to strike it. The hunter finally drew a long breath, shifting his weight. His eyes darted from the cowboys, fractured, faithless, to the circle of Apaches, unyielding, patient, and for the first time, doubt flickered. Still, his hand hovered on his revolver. I came for him, he said, voice low, strained, and I'll leave with him, or I won't leave at all. Nahel took one step forward, closing the gap between them to less than a pace. His voice dropped to a whisper that still carried like a drum. Then you have already chosen. The hunter's fingers tightened around the grip. The circle of Apaches tensed. The cowboys edged back, ready to scatter. Cutter's breath came in frantic bursts, a trapped animal watching two predators decide his fate. And in that moment, the first crack of thunder rolled across the horizon. Dark clouds gathered suddenly, lightning splintering the far-off mountains. The sky itself seemed to prepare for judgment. The thunder rolled closer, shaking the boards beneath the trading post, as if the sky itself had joined the circle. Every man felt it in his chest. The bounty hunter's hand twitched on the revolver. The Apache riders leaned forward in their saddles, eyes burning through the dust. The cowboy shifted backward, torn between loyalty and the instinct to run. Cutter stood frozen in the middle, mouth dry, sweat cutting paths through the dirt on his face. His voice cracked when he tried to speak. Wait a minute. No need for... He never finished. The bounty hunter yanked his revolver free in one sudden motion, but before the barrel could level, two arrows sang through the air. One struck the ground beside his boot. The other split clean through his hat, tearing it from his head. The shot fired anyway, the bullet slamming into the porch post inches from Nahel's chest, splintering wood in an explosion of dust. Chaos erupted. The Apache riders surged forward, their horses lunging like waves breaking against rock. Cutter's gang scrambled, some fumbling for guns, others backing away in panic. One fired into the air, wild and useless, before an Apache rifle butt crashed into his jaw, dropping him cold. Nahel did not move. He stood on the porch, his daughter behind him, calm as stone in the storm. His hand never left her shoulder, His eyes never left the bounty hunter. The hunter spun, firing again. An Apache warrior cried out, falling from his saddle, clutching a bleeding arm. The circle closed tighter, but Nahel raised his hand high, halting them mid-charge. His voice cut through the gun smoke. "Alive?" The command was simple, unshakable. The Apaches froze where they stood, discipline forged over generations keeping them from spilling blood in rage. The bounty hunter realized too late what that meant. They didn't want him dead. They wanted him contained, judged. His eyes darted to Cutter, searching for an ally. But Cutter only shook his head wildly, hands raised, desperate to show he had no part in the madness. The hunter's lips peeled back in a snarl. "You think you can chain me? I'll take half of you with me before I fall." Nahel's daughter stepped out from behind her father, basket still clutched to her chest, her gaze unflinching. "You already fell when you drew against my father." The words struck like lightning. The bounty hunter fired again, reckless. The bullet screamed past her ear, so close it singed her braid. A gasp rippled through the circle, a collective intake of breath that turned to thunderous silence. Then the Apache riders moved as one. Two leapt from their horses, tackling the hunter before he could chamber another round. His revolver flew from his hand, clattering across the dirt. He fought like a cornered wolf, elbows and fists striking, but the riders held fast, dragging him to the ground. Dust rose in choking clouds as the struggle raged. Cutter stumbled back, nearly tripping over the porch step. His men scattered, two bolting toward the desert, another throwing down his pistol in surrender. The last stood frozen, torn between fight and flight, until a mounted Apache leveled a rifle barrel at his chest and ended the debate. He dropped his weapon, hands trembling in the air. The bounty hunter's roar turned to a grunt of pain as one of the warriors slammed his wrist against the ground, pinning him. A knife flashed, cutting the rope from a saddlebag, binding his arms tight behind him. Still he writhed, teeth bared. "You think this is over? You think your law matters when I ride for the governor? He'll come for me. He'll come for all of you." Nahel descended the porch steps at last, slow and deliberate, the storm building overhead. His shadow stretched long across the dirt. He stopped before the bound hunter, who still strained against the ropes like a trapped beast. The old chief's voice was quiet, yet it silenced even the thunder for a moment. "The governor's reach ends where the desert begins. But your insult, it carries farther than any border." The hunter spat at his boots. "Savages. All of you. You'll burn for this." Nahel did not answer. He turned instead to his daughter. Her hands were steady on the basket, her eyes unshaken. He nodded once. She stepped forward, kneeling beside the bound man. From the basket, she took a handful of herbs, the same ones Cutter had spilled into the dirt. She scattered them on the ground beside the hunter's face, their scent sharp and clean against the dust and blood. The gesture was clear. Where shame had fallen, dignity had been restored. The hunter blinked, confused at the act, but the Apaches understood. They murmured low. Approval carried in the wind. Cutter trembled, realizing the noose had shifted from the bounty hunter's neck to his own. His gang was gone, his law had crumbled, and he stood alone before the chief and the tribe he had mocked. The storm broke at last. Rain spattered against the dust, turning it to mud, washing streaks of blood from the ground. Lightning split the horizon, illuminating Cutter's pale face, and Nahel turned toward him. The rain came harder, hissing on the hot earth, drumming on the roofs of the trading post, and turning the dust into sticky mud. The storm's roar drowned the usual sounds of the desert. No more cicadas, no more wind, only water and thunder. It was as if the heavens themselves demanded witness to what was about to unfold. Cutter stood trembling, his revolver limp at his side, fingers slick with sweat. His men were gone, scattered, broken or surrendered. The bounty hunter lay bound in the mud, spitting curses, but powerless, and Cutter, once the loudest voice in the circle, was silent. His boots sank deeper into the earth with every step backward, but there was nowhere left to run. Nahel faced him now, steady and tall despite the rain pouring down his weathered face. His daughter stood at his side, braid soaked, her eyes locked on Cutter with the calm certainty of someone who had already seen his fate. The Apache riders encircled tighter, their bows and rifles steady but unused. They didn't need to move. The power wasn't in their weapons anymore. It was in the silence, in the judgment pressing down on Cutter's shoulders. The outlaw's voice finally broke free, hoarse and desperate. I didn't mean nothing by it. Just fun. That's all it was. A joke." He gestured wildly, rain spraying from his sleeve. "You think I'd really hurt her? I was just teasing like we do. Hell, I didn't know—" Nahel cut him off with a voice low but resonant, carrying through the rain. "You knew enough to laugh while she stood in silence. You knew enough to put your hand where it did not belong. You knew enough to shame her before strangers." Cutter's mouth worked, but no words came. He lowered his head, rain dripping from his chin. His body shook, not from cold but from the weight of what he had done. Nahel stepped forward, his boots sinking into the mud until he stood only a pace away. "When a man steals, the law of your people takes his hand. When a man kills me, your rope takes his neck. But when a man brings shame on a daughter before her father, what should be taken then?" The question hung like thunder. The riders murmured low, some nodding, others silent. Cutter swallowed hard, his throat tight. His eyes darted to the bound bounty hunter, as if hoping for salvation from the very man who had come to drag him in chains. But the hunter only sneered, spitting water into the mud. Cutter's knees buckled. He dropped into the muck, his revolver falling from his hand. "Please," he rasped, "don't kill me. I'll leave. I'll never come back here, I swear it." Nahel's daughter spoke then, her voice calm but sharp. "Leaving doesn't wash away what you did. The shame stays if you walk away with breath still in your chest." The outlaw looked at her, tears mixing with the rain. For the first time, he saw her not as a girl to mock, but as a mirror to his own cowardice. He opened his mouth, but no excuse would come. Only a sob escaped, raw and pitiful. Nahel raised his hand, and the circle hushed at once. Every Apache eye turned to him. He looked at Cutter long and hard, the storm flashing in his gaze. "This man is wanted by your law," he said, gesturing to the poster still clenched in the bounty hunter's teeth. "But he is also judged by ours. Tonight, he will face both." Cutter froze. "Both? What does that mean?" Nahel's silence was heavier than any answer. He turned to his daughter, and for the first time, she stepped forward, standing alone in the rain. She looked Cutter in the eyes, unblinking. Then she reached into her basket and pulled free a strip of cloth. The blindfold Cutter's laughter had torn loose earlier. She held it up for all to see, then let it drop into the mud at his feet. The message was clear. His mockery would not be forgotten. His shame would be marked. Cutter fell to his knees fully now, mud soaking his trousers, his hands clasped together in a begging gesture. "Don't do this. Don't—" Nahel raised his hand again, cutting him off. The riders shifted, closing in slowly, like wolves tightening around prey. The bounty hunter strained against his ropes, eager to see the outlaw torn apart before him, but powerless to intervene. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating Cutter's pale face. Nahel's voice came once more, final and steady. "You laughed at silence. Now you will learn what it means to be silent yourself." The riders advanced, shadows through the rain. Cutter screamed, the sound ripped from his throat, swallowed by the storm. And then sudden stillness. The circle stopped just short of him, leaving his fate hanging in the charged air. The rain eased into a steady drizzle, but the silence in the circle was louder than any storm. Cutter knelt in the mud, hands shaking, chest heaving as he tried to swallow the weight of judgment. Around him, Apache riders stood motionless, faces carved from stone. Every eye watched, waiting for Nahel to give the word that would seal his fate. The outlaw's voice broke the silence, shrill and cracked. "Please, listen, I wasn't myself. The drink, the heat, it twists a man's head. I didn't know who she was." "I didn't know she was your daughter." Nahel's face remained unreadable. "And if she had not been mine," he asked, "would her worth have been less?" The question hung heavy. Cutter opened his mouth, but no words came. His silence condemned him more than any confession. One of the riders stepped forward, a scarred elder with gray braids and eyes that had seen too many winters. He spoke in Apache, his voice sharp, each word like a drumbeat. The younger warriors nodded, some striking the butts of their rifles against the wet earth in agreement. Nahel's daughter listened carefully, then translated for the outlaw in clipped English. "He says shame cannot be washed with gold. It must be washed with blood." Cutter's eyes went wide. He spun toward the bounty hunter, who still lay bound in the mud, rain dripping from his hatless head. Tell him the governor wants me alive." "You can't let them." The bounty hunter smirked despite his ropes. "For $1,000, I'd rather see you dead than share the reward. You ain't my problem anymore." Despair flickered across Cutter's face. He dropped his head, shoulders slumping, breath ragged. The circle inched closer, not with sudden violence, but with the calm inevitability of a verdict. Then, a voice cut through the rain. "Wait!" It was one of Cutter's own men, the last who hadn't fled or surrendered. He staggered forward, hat clutched in trembling hands, eyes darting between Nahel and his chief riders. "There's something they don't know," he stammered, "something about him." Cutter's head snapped up. "Shut your mouth, Hank." But Hank pressed on, desperation spilling from him. "He ain't just some outlaw with a bounty. He worked for the governor himself once. Carried messages, collected debts, did dirty work no lawman would touch. They wanted him gone because he knew too much. That's why the price is higher now. They don't want him brought in alive. They want him erased." The circle stirred, murmurs rippling through the riders. Nahel's eyes narrowed, studying Cutter anew. His daughter tilted her head, curious, unshaken. Cutter shouted, rage drowning his fear. "Lies! He's lying!" Trying to save his own skin. But the look in Hank's eyes was not of a liar. It was of a man who had carried truth too long and cracked under its weight. Nahel's voice was low, deliberate. "So, you are not only a coward, you are a tool, a weapon for men who hide behind paper and coin." The revelation shifted everything. Cutter was no longer just an outlaw mocking a girl. He was a thread in a larger tapestry of corruption, a pawn abandoned by the very law he'd invoked. The riders spoke again in their language, the debate rising in intensity. Some wanted him executed here, his blood soaking the mud as payment. Others, hearing Hank's words, argued that exposing him to the white man's world could wound their enemy deeper than a blade. Nahel listened, his face grave, the storm's aftershocks rumbling overhead. His daughter stepped closer, her voice steady. If they erase him in silence, his shame dies with him. But if he is seen for what he is, the shame spreads to those who used him. The elder with grey braids nodded slowly. Others followed, their murmurs softening into agreement. Cutter shook his head violently, panic returning in waves. "No, no! You can't hand me over. They'll torture me, hang me slow. Kill me here if you have to, but don't send me back." Nahel looked down at him, rain glistening on his brow. "You wanted the governor's law. You wanted the paper that named your worth. Now you will carry that same paper back to them and show them what they created." The decision struck like lightning. The bounty hunter's eyes widened. His prize was slipping from his grasp. He struggled against the ropes, snarling, "No, he's mine. You can't take this from me. I earned him." Nahel ignored him. He raised his hand, and the circle shifted, two riders stepping forward to drag Cutter to his feet. His knees buckled. His voice broke into a pathetic wail. "No, please, not them. Kill me here. Kill me now." But the riders held him fast, his protests drowned by the storm. Nahel turned once more to his daughter. "Tonight, you restored what he tried to break. His shame will not vanish. It will spread like smoke to the men who thought him useful." Her eyes met his, calm as the rain. "Then let him live in chains, and let his breath carry the truth." The outlaw sobbed, thrashing against the warrior's grip. But no mercy answered him, only the steady hands of a people who would not let shame slip quietly into the dark. And somewhere in the distance, another rumble of thunder carried, not from the storm but from the far horizon. Riders, unknown, approaching fast. The rumble of hooves grew louder, distinct from the storm's thunder. This was no echo, no trick of the wind. Horses, many of them, charging hard through the mud. The Apache riders stiffened, their circle tightening again around Nahel, his daughter, and the bound men at their center. Rifles lifted, bows drew taut. The storm had quieted for a moment. But now a fresh tempest was riding in. Cutter froze, his head jerking toward the sound. Hope flared in his eyes, wild and desperate. "My boys," he whispered. "They came back for me." But even as he said it, doubt flickered. The rhythm was too steady, too disciplined, not the erratic rush of outlaws. This was organized, military. The first shapes broke through the mist, a column of riders in grey coats, slicked with rain, rifles across their saddles, badges glinting on their chests, lawmen, a marshal at their head, his broad hat dripping, his moustache bristling with rain. The cowboys who had fled earlier reappeared among the rear of the column, faces pale, pointing into the circle. Cutter's heart leapt, then sank. These weren't his men. These were men who wanted him caged or buried. The marshal raised a gloved hand, halting the column just short of the Apache line. His horse snorted, stamping in the mud. He looked over the scene. The circle of warriors, the bound bounty hunter. Cutter held fast between two riders, Nahel standing tall in the center, his daughter at his side. "Chief Nahel," the marshal called, his voice booming over the rain. "You've got something that belongs to the United States." His finger jabbed toward Cutter. "That man is wanted in 3 territories. Step aside, and we'll take him." The Apache circle did not flinch. Their rifles stayed trained, their horses restless beneath them. Nahel did not answer immediately. His silence stretched, making the marshal's men fidget in their saddles. Finally, Nahel spoke, calm but carrying. "You want the coward? Then you should have taken him before he spat on what was sacred. You come late like buzzards after the kill." The marshal scowled. "Don't test me, Chief. I got 40 men here, each one sworn to the law. You defy us. It's war." "You want that?" the riders murmured low, the tension thick as smoke. Nahel's daughter lifted her chin, her braid dripping rain, her voice cutting through the standoff. "War already came the moment your men laughed while he mocked me." The marshal blinked, surprised by her English, but his scowl deepened. "This ain't about pride, girl. This is about the law, and the law says he hangs in Santa Fe." Nahel stepped forward, his hand still raised to hold back his own riders. "Your law has many words," he said, "but none strong enough to clean the shame he brought here. He mocked what cannot be mocked. My people demand judgment." The marshal shifted uneasily. He hadn't expected resistance this firm. The rain pounded harder, running into his eyes. He wiped it away, then barked to his men, "Take him, now." At once, rifles cocked, horses surged forward. But before the line could break the circle, a gunshot cracked. Not from the marshal's men, from inside the circle. The bound bounty hunter had managed to roll onto his side, his teeth clenched on the handle of a small derringer he'd hidden in his coat. The shot flew wild, grazing the arm of one Apache rider and throwing the circle into chaos. That single act was enough. The marshal's men spurred forward, shouting, their rifles blazing. The Apache riders answered, bows snapping, rifles firing back. The clearing erupted into thunder louder than the storm itself. Cutter screamed as bullets whipped past him, struggling against the grip of the 2 warriors who held him fast. His eyes were wild, searching for escape, for salvation in the chaos. "No, let me go, don't let them take me." Nahel pulled his daughter behind him, shielding her as bullets slammed into the mud around them. The circle fought to hold, but the marshal's numbers pressed hard. Horses collided, men shouted, steel clashed in the rain. The marshal himself rode straight into the fray, pistol drawn, eyes fixed on Cutter. "Alive, damn it!" he roared. "The governor wants him alive." Cutter's knees buckled, his screams drowned by the storm and gunfire. For the first time, he realized there might be no escape, not from the Apaches, not from the bounty hunter, not from the marshal. Every side wanted him, not for who he was, but for what he represented. And then, through the chaos, Nahel's voice rose, deep and steady, a single word shouted above the roar. The Apache riders obeyed instantly, shifting formation, pulling Cutter tighter into the center, protecting him, not from mercy, from choice. The marshal saw it, fury twisting his face. "You're shielding him!" "You'll regret this, Chief." He spurred his horse harder, charging straight into the circle. And Nahel stepped forward to meet him, rain pouring off his shoulders, his eyes locked on the marshals. The clearing exploded into chaos. Gunfire cracked through the rain, hooves pounded mud into flying sprays, and shouts in English and Apache collided with the thunder overhead. The storm had merged with battle, sky and earth roaring together. Cutter was dragged backward by the two Apache warriors gripping his arms. He kicked and thrashed, but their hold was iron. His eyes darted wildly, catching flashes of steel, muzzle fire, and feathers streaking through the smoke. He screamed, but the sound drowned in the storm. The marshal rode straight into the circle, pistol raised, his horse barreling through the press of bodies. Nahel stepped forward, calm against the frenzy, his daughter behind him, shielded by his steady frame. With a single gesture, he ordered the riders nearest her to hold the line. Then he walked into the path of the charging marshal. The lawman pulled his reins hard, his horse rearing. The beast's hooves lashed dangerously close to Nahel, but the chief did not flinch. His hand rested on a hatchet at his side, but he did not raise it. Instead, his voice thundered over the chaos. "You bring war for one coward? You call this law?" The marshal's mustache dripped with rain, his eyes wild. "This ain't about him, Chief. It's about order. If you defy the United States, every tribe in this desert will pay the price. Step aside, or I'll bury you with him." Nahel's eyes burned like embers. "My people were buried long before your law spoke their names. We rise from the graves you made." The marshal snarled and fired. The bullet tore Nahel's sleeve, grazing his arm. In the same heartbeat, Nahel's hatchet flashed. The blade slammed into the marshal's pistol, knocking it from his grip. The gun spun through the mud, useless. The crowd gasped. For a moment, time slowed. The marshal, unarmed, stared at Nahel, rain streaking his face. Fury twisted his mouth. He leapt from his saddle, tackling Nahel into the mud. The two men struggled, in fist striking, mud splattering across their faces. Nahel's strength was not in speed but in endurance. Every blow from the marshal landed with fury, but Nahel absorbed them like stone. When he struck back, it was deliberate, crushing. Around them, the battle raged. Apache warriors fought in tight formation, moving like wolves, hit, fade, strike again. Lawmen pressed with rifles and revolvers, their numbers heavy but discipline fraying. The bounty hunter, still bound, writhed in the mud, screaming curses at both sides. Cutter was dragged deeper into the circle, his voice rising in panic. "No, don't keep me here. They'll kill us all for me." His words were desperate, pathetic, but no one listened. He was no longer a man, only the spark that lit the fire. The marshal managed to pin Nahel's shoulders into the mud, his knee pressing into the chief's chest. He raised a knife, teeth gritted, ready to drive it down. But Nahel's daughter moved. She slipped free from the guards who tried to hold her back, darting across the mud, braid whipping behind her. Her voice rang out, sharp as lightning. "Father?" Nahel twisted just as the blade fell. The knife sliced across his shoulder, deep but not fatal. Pain flashed across his face, but his grip caught the marshal's wrist. With a guttural roar, Nahel wrenched the man sideways, sending the knife spinning into the mud. The two men rolled, Nahel rising first, his chest heaving, blood mixing with rain down his arm. He seized the marshal by his coat, hauling him upright. Their faces were inches apart. "You think your paper gives you power," Nahel growled, "but power is in the ground, in the people who bleed on it." The marshal spat blood into his face. "Then bleed more." They clashed again, fists hammering, mud flying. Around them, the riders roared in unison, the storm swelling with their cries. Cutter's screams pierced through the madness. "Stop them! Stop him! Don't you see? If he kills the marshal, the whole army will come. You'll all die for me." His words froze more than one heart. The truth in them was sharp, undeniable. Even Nahel's daughter faltered, her breath catching. For if the marshal fell, the retaliation would be merciless. Nahel heard the words but did not stop. His fist crashed into the marshal's jaw, dropping the lawman into the mud. The circle surged, Apaches ready to finish what had begun. And then, another shot. The bounty hunter, freed somehow from his bonds, stood with the marshal's lost pistol in hand, smoke curling from the barrel. An Apache warrior staggered, clutching his side. The hunter's eyes burned with madness as he leveled the pistol again, his voice hoarse. If nobody gets him, then nobody wins. He dies here, with me. The barrel swung toward Cutter. The clearing froze. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath. The bounty hunter stood slick with mud, the marshal's pistol steady in his hands. His wrists were still raw from the ropes, blood streaking down his arms, but his grip on the weapon was firm. His eyes gleamed with madness and spite. Cutter collapsed in the mud, his knees sinking deeper as the barrel fixed on him. He raised his hands, trembling. "No, no, don't do this! You can't! I'm worth money alive!" The hunter laughed, a harsh sound swallowed by the rain. "Money don't matter if I leave here in a grave. You think you're my ticket? No. You're my curse. And I'll break it now." The Apache riders shifted, bows and rifles drawn, but Nahel lifted his hand, halting them. His wound bled freely down his arm, but his gaze never wavered from the man with the gun. His daughter clung to his side, her face calm yet unyielding. The marshal, dazed from the fight, staggered to his feet. His jaw was swollen, his coat torn, but his voice carried rage. "Shoot him if you must. He's mine by law. But if you kill him, you rob me no less than them." The hunter sneered. "Law. This man's worth is nothing but lies on paper. You want him alive to keep your rope busy. They want him to wash their shame. I want him to stop haunting me." Cutter's voice broke into a sob. "Please, I'll do anything. I'll pay you double the bounty. Triple. Just don't." The hunter's finger tightened on the trigger. Nahel stepped forward, slow, deliberate, mud sucking at his boots. His voice cut through the rain, calm as stone. "You kill him now. You kill nothing. His shame will vanish into the dirt with him. The law will write another lie. The governor will smile, thinking justice done. And you will die here, forgotten." The hunter's hand trembled, just barely. He snarled, shaking his head. Better forgotten than hunted forever. Nahel took another step. His riders held their breath. His daughter's eyes locked on the hunter, unblinking. "You are hunted," Nahel said, "not because of him, because of who you became chasing him. You think killing a coward will make you free? No. It will chain you tighter than the rope you escaped." For the first time, the hunter's face faltered. Rain dripped from the brim of his brow, mixing with sweat. His gaze darted to Cutter, who whimpered in the mud like a broken animal, then back to Nahel, whose eyes burned with unshakable certainty. The marshal seized the moment, lunging forward. "Drop it, damn you!" he shouted, grabbing for the pistol. The hunter twisted, firing. The shot went wide, tearing into the mud inches from Cutter's knee. The outlaw shrieked, collapsing fully into the muck. Apaches loosed arrows in the same breath. One struck the pistol, knocking it from the hunter's hand, spinning into the rain. Another pinned his coat to the earth, leaving him sprawled, cursing. Chaos surged again, warriors shouting, the marshal struggling against Apache grips, the hunter writhing. Cutter crawled backward, desperate to vanish into the storm, but the riders seized him too, dragging him back into the circle. When the noise ebbed, Nahel stood over both men, Cutter on his knees, the hunter pinned to the mud, the marshal restrained by warriors on either side. 3 faces, 3 enemies, 3 claims. Nahel's daughter spoke softly, her voice carrying like a hymn through the rain. "Father, they all want him. One for gold, one for rope, one for honor. What will you give him?" Nahel's chest rose and fell, with slow, deliberate breaths. His arm throbbed with pain, his blood mixing with the mud, but his gaze was steady. He looked at Cutter, broken and whimpering, at the hunter, seething with futile rage, at the marshal, glaring with pride and humiliation. "The coward is no longer his own," Nahel said. "He belongs to the choices he made, and now those choices weigh on all of us." He turned to his riders, their weapons still taut. "Hold them," he ordered. "None leave until judgment is given." The storm swelled again, lightning splitting the sky. Cutter sobbed openly, begging for a mercy no one offered. The hunter cursed, spitting defiance though his hands trembled. The marshal strained against his captors, shouting about law and war. Nahel raised his hand one last time, his daughter stepping closer, her eyes steady as the horizon. "Tomorrow, when the sun rises, he will face judgment before both laws, yours and ours." And he will not walk free from either. The riders lowered their weapons but did not break formation. The prisoners knelt in the mud, bound by more than ropes, bound by the weight of a reckoning that could not be escaped. And as the storm raged overhead, the night promised no rest, only the slow approach of dawn, and with it, the fate of a man who thought himself untouchable. Dawn crept slowly across the desert, washing the soaked earth in pale light. The storm had passed, leaving the clearing drenched, the mud thick and cold beneath every boot. The Apache riders still formed their circle, horses restless but steady. In the center, 3 men waited for their fates. James Cutter on his knees, filthy and broken, the marshal, bound but unbowed, and the bounty hunter, tethered again after his outburst, his glare burning with venom. Nahel stood tall, blood dried on his arm, his daughter at his side. Her braid was heavy with rain, but her eyes were bright, fixed on the horizon, as if she had seen this moment long before it came. The air was taut with silence. No one moved. No one dared break it until Nahel finally raised his voice. Last night, shame fell upon my daughter before all who stood here. 3 laws now claim the man who brought it. 1 of gold. His eyes flicked to the bounty hunter. 1 of paper. He looked at the marshal. And 1 of the earth, older than both. The marshal spat into the mud. You speak fine words, Chief, but the law is clear. He belongs to the United States. The governor will see him hang, and if you stand in the way, you'll answer for it. The bounty hunter barked a bitter laugh. You think the governor wants him to hang? He wants him gone? They raise the bounty to make sure he disappears. They don't want a trial. They want silence. And I can give it to them now. Cutter trembled, his voice hoarse from crying through the night. Please, don't let them. I'll do anything. I'll serve you, Chief. I'll work for your people. Nahel silenced him with a glance. Your mouth has already spoken enough. The riders stirred, some calling in Apache, others nodding, their anger still fresh. The elder with grey braids stepped forward, his voice firm. Blood washes shame. Nahel nodded, but did not answer. Instead, he looked at his daughter. She stepped closer to Cutter, her small figure casting a long shadow across his trembling body. She bent down, lifted the blindfold he had mocked, and tied it firmly around his eyes. Cutter whimpered, blind in the mud, stripped of even the false strength his gaze had once carried. Her voice was soft but sharp as flint. He wanted me blind. Now he will know what it means. The marshal growled, straining against his captors. This is savagery. You call this justice. You're no better than the animals they say you are. Nahel turned to him, calm and unshaken. Justice is not yours to name here, but you will witness it. The bounty hunter snarled. Then give him to me. End this dance. I'll take him where he belongs. Nahel shook his head. You will take nothing. You hunt for coin. You kill for silence. But my people kill for truth. And truth demands the world see what this man is. He raised his hand, and the circle parted just enough to reveal the horizon. The first rays of sun broke across the ridge, painting the clearing in gold. Nahel's voice carried with it. James Cutter will not die in secret. He will not vanish into rope or coin. He will be walked into the nearest town, blindfolded, shamed before those who laughed with him. His name will be spoken, his crimes carried on every tongue. And only then, when his cowardice has no place left to hide, will his breath be taken. Gasps rippled through the circle. The marshal shouted in fury, You can't! He's ours! That's not... But the bounty hunter cut him off, spitting venom. Better to slit his throat now than let him mock you again. You'll regret sparing him. Nahel did not look at them. He turned only to his daughter. You were mocked in silence. Now you will speak the last word. What fate does he deserve? The girl stood tall, her voice steady, unwavering. Let him walk blind into the town he thought was his. Let every man see him broken. Let every woman see him stripped of his laughter. Let them spit as he once spat on me. And when his shame is complete, let the ground take him. Nahel nodded, his face solemn. The decision was sealed. The riders moved as one. Cutter was hauled to his feet, his blindfold tight, his body shaking. He cried out, begged, but his voice was drowned by the sound of hooves pounding in unison. The marshal cursed, the bounty hunter raged, but both were held fast, powerless to stop what was already in motion. The sun rose higher, and with it, the circle began its march. The outlaw who thought himself untouchable was dragged forward, blind and broken, toward the judgment that awaited him, not in the shadows, but in the light of day. The sun climbed higher as the Apache riders led their slow march toward White Butte. Cutter stumbled blindly, his wrists bound, the blindfold tight across his eyes, his boots dragged through the mud, his knees buckling, but the warriors on either side held him steady. Every step was heavy, every breath a sob swallowed by the morning air. Behind him, the marshal rode bound on his own horse, his fury simmering in silence. The bounty hunter trailed on foot, roped like a criminal himself, his curses spent, his voice hoarse. They were captives of their own choices, just as Cutter was. Nahel rode at the front, his daughter beside him on a smaller horse, her head high. She carried no weapon, only the basket of herbs Cutter had once spilled. Now it rested in her lap, whole, unbroken, a symbol of what had been restored. When they reached the edge of town, the riders slowed. The streets filled quickly, merchants, ranchers, townsfolk pouring out of shops and saloons, drawn by the sound of hooves and the sight of the strange procession. Whispered questions rippled through the crowd. Is that Cutter? Why is he blindfolded? Who are they bringing with him? Nahel raised his hand and the riders stopped in the square. Cutter was shoved forward into the mud, blind and trembling. His breath came in ragged sobs, his voice breaking. Don't let them, please, somebody help me. But no one moved. Nahel dismounted slowly, his wound bound but still aching. He stood tall, his daughter at his side. His voice carried through the square, calm but cutting. This man mocked what is sacred. He laid hands on a daughter before her father, and he laughed while others watched. His shame is now yours to see. He belongs not to coin, not to paper, but to truth. And truth demands witness, the townsfolk murmured, eyes shifting uneasily. Some spat into the dirt, others turned away, ashamed. Cutter whimpered, his body sagging, but the riders forced him to kneel. The marshal shouted from behind, "He belongs to the law, you can't—" Nahel silenced him with a single look. "Your law can take him when his shame is complete, but not before." The bounty hunter sneered, his voice bitter. "Shame won't stop a rope." "You waste your breath." Nahel ignored him. He turned to his daughter. She stepped forward, lifting the basket high so all could see. Then she scattered the herbs into the mud at Cutter's knees, the same way they had once fallen. Only now, it was not by his cruelty but by her choice. Her voice rang clear, unwavering. "He thought my silence made me small, but silence has its own weight. Today, his silence speaks louder than his laughter ever did." The crowd hushed. Cutter sobbed, broken, unable to see the faces that judged him. Nahel placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, pride flickering in his eyes. "The shame is washed," he said. "What remains is yours, Marshal. Take him. Let your paper finish what honor has already done." The marshal, red with fury, barked orders. His men dismounted, seizing Cutter and hauling him upright. His blindfold stayed tied, his head bowed. The Apache riders did not resist. Their judgment was complete. The bounty hunter shouted in vain, straining against his bonds. "He was mine. He should have died by my hand." But his words fell flat, ignored by all. As the lawmen dragged Cutter away, Nahel and his daughter mounted once more. The Apache riders began their return to the desert, their silhouettes framed against the rising sun. They carried no trophies, no spoils. Only the knowledge that honor had been defended in a way no rope or coin could erase. The girl looked back once at the town, at the broken figure stumbling in chains. Her voice was soft, almost to herself. "He thought me blind, but I saw him clearer than he ever saw himself." Nahel heard her words, and though his face remained stern, a quiet satisfaction settled in his chest. She had endured the shame. She had faced it. And in the end, her dignity stood unbroken, stronger than any law. The desert wind rose, carrying away the last echoes of Cutter's sobs. The sun bathed the land in gold, and the riders vanished into the horizon, leaving behind a story that would not be forgotten. Some men believe their laughter shields them from consequence. Some believe paper and coin will bury their sins. But shame has a way of finding daylight, and when it does, it strips a man bare. If this story moved you, remember, dignity is not given. It is defended, even in silence. Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this one, and let this tale remind you, the strongest voice often belongs to those who speak the least.